My buddies are like, hey, let's go to brunch on Sunday. We'll do a boozy brunch. And I'm like, I got to go do open houses at my buildings. Like, I can't. But at the end of the day, I made $30,000. I leased 6 apartments. And I remember calling my buddy being like, you know what you did today? You went to brunch. You know what I did today? I made 30 grand. And like, that was really the biggest entrepreneurial moment I've ever had in my life was holy shit. Like you can control your life here.
Yo, what's up, everybody? I'm stoked for this episode, particularly because I'm going to pilot a new one. This is Forward to Extraordinary. It's a new series where I'm going to feature founders, operators, and their journey from zero to market and try to figure out all the wisdom that I possibly can to give you, as my viewer, the greatest insight into success. And so I'm joined today by somebody that I'm super fascinated by. Not only are they a customer of my agency, Cause of a Kind, but they're also a dear friend of my dear friend, Rob Stouffer. So Rob, I know you're going to listen to this one. Dude, you're a pleasure to be friends with. I love your pursuit. One day you'll be on the show, but this is not about Rob. This is not about me. Jordan Sachs, welcome to this episode of Forward to Extraordinary. I cannot wait to unpack your zero to market. You're an operator in the real estate industry, and I'm super fascinated with that as a hobbyist, but also for somebody that operates there as an agency founder, and that's one of the categories that we specialize in. So Jordan, welcome to the episode, man.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here. It's been great to work with you so far and thrilled to be on the podcast.
Well, dude, it's a little bit that I could give back to you. I'm super appreciative of your trust and of our journey along the way. We've been partners for probably about a year now, maybe 10 months or so. We've done some incredible things. I'll let you control the narrative. It's all your jam for today. But dude, as I always like to on these shows, I'd love to know a little bit about you, your human experience, and kind of where it all begins to make the Jordan Sachs that exists today.
Well, I appreciate it. It's just, it's a story and a lot of different iterations. And I think in the spirit of entrepreneurship, there are iterations and it's not a linear path and you see opportunity and you try to take it. I think I'll take you back to the beginning of my career. Born and raised in Scottsdale, Arizona, went to school in New Orleans at Tulane, naturally kept migrating to the East Coast. Arizona in 2007 was not a place to go back and try to be the entrepreneur that I felt like I was intended to be. Come from a great family. My dad was the ultimate entrepreneur in his own business. It was insurance, but he found a way to really control his narrative and taught me at a young age that it's really important that the harder you work, the more you can provide for yourself and put yourself in the position to create your own destiny. And I graduated, moved to New York, got my first internship. I was doing online advertising, kind of like, what a lot of these 22-year-olds were doing, had no idea the path I wanted, wasn't interested in real estate, didn't even think about real estate. Fast forward, a year and a half into my career, the industry changed pretty rapidly. And I was always a future thinking person. And I tend to live 10 years ahead of time of where am I going to be? And I just didn't see that structure there. And I felt like I was starting to waste time. And I'm not big on wasting time. So I inadvertently fell into real estate through my best friend, Todd Jacobs, who's one of my business partners in all of our business lines. And we moved to New York. We were roommates in Murray Hill together. Todd was in doing investment sales on the commercial real estate side. I was doing this advertising platform. We ended up, fast forward that year, I got more involved with him. He said, hey, listen, we're going to go buy this 6 building package in the Lower East Side, 1900s tenement style apartment buildings. And we're going to do this thing called value add, right? And value add, it wasn't that sure of it at the time, but value add, in definition is taking something that is undervalued or, dilapidated in terms of the specs and the renovations and, it needs a facelift. We're going to buy those buildings. We're going to put in the capital to do that. We're going to reinvent the real estate. We're going to make it look beautiful. We're going to lease the apartments for a lot more than what we bought them for. And I jumped in. It was my first moment where I said, oh, like I'm working for myself and this only really takes a lot of hard work. And I think I'm really good at that. And I love working with my best friend. And maybe this is my first opportunity to control my path forward. So we jumped in head first. I left my advertising job, joined into this partnership and we went to work. We came to market, meaning that we finished the renovations, 260 units, 10 retail spaces, made them beautiful, spent a ton of money doing it. And now it became time to release all those spaces. And we needed to release those spaces at a very high number, considering how much money we put into it and kind of where the business plan needed to go to make the return that we needed for our investors. And I called the local real estate brokerages that handled in New York City. The rental market is very much handled by outside brokers, unlike other cities where the property managers and the on-site managers do the leasing. There it was really run by third parties. And so I called a bunch of brokers and said, hey, listen, I have, at the time, it amounted to, I don't know, $700,000 of commissions because you pay a 1 month fee for leasing apartments in New York. And the resounding response was like, we don't do that. Like, we don't know how to kind of do that in these old buildings. Like, if you gave me a new glass tower, we can give you, marketing and websites and personnel and operations. And this was because in 2007, 8, this value add proposition was just kind of coming to market. And it was in the early stages in New York of people buying really old tenement style buildings and revamping them and making them look brand new. And so these brokerages weren't, accustomed to how to work in an environment that didn't have a beautiful leasing office and all the bells and whistles that made their job easier. And we were 25 and we said, and this is going to be the first part in my path that you're going to see us going from what I call one side of the table to the other. And we said, all right, we're 25. We can charge a 1 month fee and take that for ourselves. I'm going to go lease my own apartments. And we started leasing our apartments. And I was leasing sometimes 7 or 8 a week at an average of $4,000 an apartment. And I woke up and I said to Todd, holy crap, this is like real money. And the benefit that we have is that we really understand what it's like to be that operator and how important it is to get the rents that we pro forma'd and how that affects the refinance. And your average rental broker has no understanding of the economics behind the things that they're trying to lease. And so we leased our portfolio. We got crazy rental numbers for them, proved the concept, hit the pro forma, and other owners in the market around us were saying, how did you get 3,000 for the 1 bedroom when I'm getting 2,000? And so we said, I don't know, why don't we like consult for you? Let me help you kind of the way we thought about it and the way we renovated and the way that we did the marketing and advertising. And like, I'll lease your apartments if you give me the exclusive right to do that, meaning nobody can lease in this building without going through us and enabling us to collect that fee. Fast forward 2009 and a half, I said to my partner, like, it's time to make this a real brokerage, like a real thing. And the emphasis is going to be owner developer exclusivity. And we are going to give them an entire suite of services, all for the exclusive relationship to get that 1 month fee on the lease. So I would walk with them. They're looking at a building to buy. I'll show up with you. I'll walk it. I'll do your pro formas. I'll do your rents. I'll give you the demographic studies. I'll speak to the bank who wants to understand the business plan better. I'll talk to your equity to pitch them on the market and how we're going to achieve these rents. I'll be a full suite of services. But at the end of the day, I just want that right to lease your buildings. And it just kind of took off. We were really, because we undercutted these bigger brokerages that just didn't know how to create a luxury experience from a leasing perspective in buildings that they deemed to not really be worth it. At Walk Up in Lower East Side, didn't like, why are we putting that much effort into it? Well, I'm getting prices that are exactly the same to the new development next door. Why would I not present it the same way to the market? And we quickly like became known as, all right, if you have these types of value add deals that are coming out of the market, like these are the guys that can go rock and roll for you. And we were hitting rents that nobody was achieving in the market. And we started a brokerage called Bold New York. And so continued our ownership side of the business, but now started growing the brokerage. And this is now post recession as all these young guys from institutional shops are coming out to say, like, I'm going to go buy my own buildings now. And I can't afford to buy the glass tower. So I'm going to buy these walk up type of buildings in Brooklyn and Queens and Bronx and Manhattan. And we really have no idea what we're doing. And you guys know what you're doing because you did it for yourself and you've done it for now, dozens of other owners. I'll bring you into the fold. And so that business really took off. And we were doing at our height, about 8 or 9,000 leases a year. We did, and we advanced past the tenement style type of buildings. And we were doing almost every new development, you can think of in New York, 1,200 unit towers, but still catering to the 10-unit building in Brooklyn. And in my opinion, giving it kind of the same level of attention as we gave to the biggest stuff. Grew that to 150 agents. Rob Stouffer, who we mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, was our CMO. Really unbelievable heartbeat to what we did, help drive that train, help bring us into, at that point it was 2010 or 2012 in terms of technology and advances in marketing. And then once we had the brokerage really humming, we took a step back again and said, like, all right, well, now we want to be owners again, right? Let's continue to buy the real estate. We'll keep the brokerage going because it's great income. It gives us a real pulse in the market. And now we're seeing kind of what every value add guy does on the planet. And it gives us a real playbook as to the rights and the wrongs and what not to do and what to do. And we did another 50 deals on the acquisition side. So, meaning we purchased another 50 properties in New York from 2010 to 2016. We did the full, in partnership with another group, we did the value add transition on those buildings and ultimately sold them, sold the whole package to an institution, made a bunch of money for our investors. Everybody was really thrilled. And it became clear to us that we're kind of now we're really muddying the waters a little bit. We're kind of the guys that will go look at deals with our owners off market or pre-purchasing, but we're also looking for ourselves. And I said to my partners, like, listen, let's find a new market. The brokerage is humming. I don't want to disrupt that. I don't want to cannibalize ourselves because we're competing with our owners. Let's find a new place. And we landed on Los Angeles. Los Angeles at the time was a supply constrained market, meaning there was very little opportunity here to develop new apartment buildings. We rely on supply and demand, right? Little supply, lots of demand. We can dictate prices and in theory have a very good business plan. And it was a mom and pop environment, meaning the big institutions weren't really playing in the small and mid asset class. It was, you're competing against doctors and dentists and other real estate professionals. Bought our first building while living in New York, 2016, and realized like, oh, it's much easier to actually like operate in LA than it is in New York. And I'm even doing it more successfully out of state than I would be doing it in my own town. Fast forward to 16 in New York, rent laws were changing, regulations were changing. They were just making it much harder to do what we did. And so we started buying in 16. We've to date purchased about 100 properties in California. We're very kind of core LA specific, now branching further south and north. Brokerage is going great, but there's always an end date to things, right? And at some point in life as an entrepreneur, if you have multiple businesses going on, you kind of have to figure where's the best time spent. And maybe it needs to be focused on one. And so 2019-ish, we started thinking about we should sell the brokerage. We were fortunate enough in 2021 to complete that transaction with Compass, who's a pretty major, maybe the largest residential real estate brokerage in the country. And we sold the entire business with all of our people. It went wonderfully. Everybody kept their jobs. It, if anything, advanced, made more money from that acquisition. And that relieved me of the brokerage, which at some point, it just 10 years of running hard and being a service provider, which is essentially what I was, and going out 3 or 4 nights a week to wine and dine. I got a little burnt out and it was time. COVID kind of filled that moment. And I think every bad thing in life has a silver lining. And my silver lining was it pushed me to sell the brokerage and move to California. And so I've been out here since 2020. Quality of life is great. It's 75 degrees every single day, so I don't miss it. So my transition from ownership to owning and operating a real estate brokerage, which I never thought I would do, but came out of a necessity that I saw for ourselves and then realized there's a void in the market for this type of service, to buying again in New York, to then transitioning to LA to purchase. And the last couple transitions happened when in 2019, as we're really buying in volume here, we realized that getting debt was really hard. New York's a different environment. There's a lot more understanding of what that value add plan looks like, and banks are lending to it and getting the business model. And when we came to LA, they just didn't get it. Every loan was a struggle. They would leave us at the table. They would change their rates last minute. They would, take away proceeds. It just got to be a point where we're like, maybe we can do this better. Maybe there's a world where, because the biggest miss on the underwriting is that person just doesn't get the real estate game the way we do. So maybe we should lend to guys like us, right? So again, sitting on this side of the table as a borrower, looking at the lending environment, saying like, we could do this better. We've had a miserable experience. Let's try to fill a void that we think exists in the market. And so in 2019, we started a company called Sunday Capital, which is a bridge lending platform, meaning that we specialize in loans for transitional multifamily real estate. So buying an old, dilapidated, undervalued property, having to put a lot of money in to get it to market, and owners like us want to take out bridge loans for a 1 to 2 year period during that process because you can get higher leverage, meaning that we're giving you more proceeds, meaning you have to raise less money, and which is ultimately in a kind of a smaller developer environment is what they're looking for, but you're going to pay more for it, right? So traditional financing might be 5.5, we're lending at 9. And so we were like, we got to prove concept before we make this a thing. And so we lent about $30 million off of our own balance sheet to other operators in California like ourselves. And, a year into that, we said, oh man, this is like real. And we figured out a way to create a value proposition in a space that had plenty of players doing it. And that was kind of owners lending to owners, right? We are a partner, not just the lender. When you have issues, we know those issues and we'll get you out of it and we'll figure it out and we'll be a team. And so that really took off. So now you have the sale of, fast forwarding a little bit, you have the sale of the brokerage. And now we're really humming on the equity business, which is Bold Partners, and the lending business at Sunday Capital. And fast forward to today, we have Sunday Capital's rocking and rolling. We have our own credit fund. We have multiple lines of leverage. We're putting out north of $300 million a year, all on kind of transitional multifamily sub $20 million loan sizes. Bold Partners, we own about 1,250 apartments. We're stable. We have no distress, no debt issues, thank God. And there's plenty of that going around the market right now. And then the last transition for us was in the past couple of years, the market's changed and buying real estate has been very challenging, as any of your real estate folks will tell you. And so we said, let's take a really hard look at our platform. We own all this real estate. Our job, our fiduciary responsibility to our investors is to make sure it operates the best it can. And we never wanted to take property management in house because it's a tough business and you're answering toilet calls and it's a thankless job. But we always figured, let's keep that third party, gives us a buffer. Things get wrong, I can fire the third party property manager. And 2 years ago, we said, we're going to do this ourselves. And if nothing more, I think we can make more money for our investors by having more control and transparency. And now we're fast forwarding to an environment where AI is becoming prevalent. Offshore employment's real. The margins on property management is a real thing. So officially a year ago, we started Define Property Management, and that we took our portfolio in-house first. We're onboarding another 1,200 units this year. At the end of the year, we'll have about 2,500 units onboarded with the goal of, I'm going to go bring this to a 30,000 unit property management company. So through that transition, the goal, and I'm sorry I'm long-winded here, but it was just kind of showing you, we sat at the side of the table, we saw a void, we thought we could fill it. We went to that side and we filled it. And now we're really a vertically integrated real estate platform where we have property construction asset management at Defined Property Management, Bold Partners for our equity acquisition business, and Sunday Capital, our lending platform. And so that's where I am today. And there was a lot of, it's scary to make transitions. It's scary to start new businesses. It's scary to see income shut off for periods of time as you're doing those things. But ultimately, I control my destiny. And, that's the path that I chose and my partners have chosen. And I wake up unemployed every year, but we somehow get out there and figure it. I tell myself, you're unemployed until you go out and make your money. And, we're here today.
You know what? I love the story, and I love how actually long-winded you went on it, because it allows me to see certain characteristics of you as an operator. And one of the biggest things, if anybody was really listening to that and the timeline, you survived two very well-known economic turmoil: 2008 financial crisis and 2020 COVID. And what I find really interesting is, like, you didn't even stop for a second to talk about like the trough of sorrow that the world was going through, especially in the real estate industry in 2008, and especially here in New York City, the epicenter of real estate. And so I got to get a little bit into Jordan's brain here, because you clearly see what's happening in the market from a supply and demand perspective. You clearly see what's happening on the economics side of that, from over leverage to unqualified lenders to unqualified buyers to whatever the scenario might be. Like, you have a unique perspective of, like, we are coming into a moment of, do we pause and like maintain our footing and like create a solid base, or do we transform? And like, I find it very interesting, like the entrepreneurial brain takes over and you use these types of moments to transform forward to extraordinary. And so I gotta ask, man, like when you're staring in the face, it will not be the last time that we all go through this. I've been listening to a lot of economic predictions, just what's going to happen over the next, 5 years or so. 2030 has like a big question mark attached to it as to like what is going to happen. And so as you look from an educated perspective to your industry, what is your formula for overcoming market level adversity? And what it seems like, I'm sure you've taken your licks along the way and have failed at certain things along the way and have shut things down and have to pivot and have to be really creative. But if you think about it from the perspective of the audience of this show, what is the formula for going toe to toe with adversity and coming out on top?
That's a great question. And you're right. Those were pivotal moments in our career. And I mentioned earlier is I'm a silver lining guy. And I don't think entrepreneurs can live in a glass half empty thought process. If you did, you're never going to advance. And a lot of people that are in a corporate environment are more prone to that thought process of safety and security. And I have my salary and I'm not willing to kind of think outside the box or take a moment that's bad and try to make it good. I looked at those situations. First of all, they were brutal, right? Luckily, I was young enough in 2008 where we were more on the tail end of the Great Recession we took advantage of that. Interest rates dropped. The real estate environment changed dramatically to try to boost development, and so we ran with that. In the leasing environment, we ran with that because buildings were having a hard time leasing up, and they were giving free months away and free broker commissions, and we ran with that. And when COVID hit, my businesses shut down. Like we were a brokerage that earned our living by showing apartments and selling them or leasing them. And overnight, we weren't doing that. And I'll tell you, COVID, that first couple of months of COVID was the hardest, outside of death in the family, was the hardest time of my life and career, and spent 20 hours a day trying to get the PPE loans that we needed and not fire people and keep the leases going and all the things like that. I easily blew over because it's easy to also have amnesia, right? And then I took that moment and I was like, wait, all right, we're 60 days in, like get it together and look at the environment right now. Because just like after the recession, we're about to hit that same kind of upstream. Interest rates are low. People are selling their buildings because they're scared of all different types of things. Like we cannot sit down and lick our wounds and be sad about our situation and cry about it. Like we got to go. And we actually purchased in 20 and 21, we bought, I think, almost 24 buildings. So we were buying almost two a month in that
Wow.
time. Well, full circle on the question is like, you just have to keep going. Because the minute you sit back and you're sad about your situation, you waste time, and time is everything. And energy is everything. You start crying and getting, weepy with your people, like it bleeds, it becomes a cancer. It is like silver lining in every bad thing. Let's move forward.
Love the perspective, man, because it is truly the entrepreneurial spirit to find a path through. And I'm sure along the way you made mistakes, you tried things that just didn't pan out. Like this is all just about the constant pursuit of what could be. And so I find it really interesting on that topic. I know you guys quite well, and I know your business, and I know your people, and you guys are really absorbing the moment of technology. And I'm sure you have along the way, but what is available to us as businesses today is a far cry from what it was, let's say, back in 2008. We're just in a different time. Can you tell me a little bit about your perspective, what you're seeing in the industry? Where is progress right now from a technology perspective? And I'm sure AI is included in that, but outside of AI, I've watched your business transform on technology brilliant basics.
Yep.
And so I'd love to know like how you are thinking about leveraging technology to transform your business and what's happening in the greater industry.
I mean, I would say real estate's the last person to advance technology. Like we're just a pretty antiquated industry. And, I think we're probably the industry that will get AI'd out the slowest. There's still definitely a human need for all this.
Big time.
I like to think that we'd always been on the forefront of what was available for real estate technology. And I think where we've really advanced our different businesses is through creating back-end systems and operating dashboards outside of the front-facing websites and the drip campaigns and the marketing and things like that. But where we worked with you on, specifically on creating the dashboard and really taking a third-party piece of technology and creating it for ourselves and then owning that's been one of the biggest game changers, having visibility into your business, right? The hardest thing being, more nimble and smaller and entrepreneurial type of companies, we're not an institution that has 30 30 accounting members and they're providing reports all day, every day, and keeping everybody very clear on where we are. The technology piece that really helped us get a better understanding of our financial situation, our vacancies, our unit turns, lending platform, whatever that is, was creating these backend systems. And now we have to talk about AI, right? Because what's happened in the past 6 months has been the craziest technology transition in my 40 years of being alive, more so than the internet coming alive, which I was around for. I'm sure you were too. We're now talking about the ability to synthesize information better. And real estate is about speed. It is not about sitting around and over analyzing, because at the time you get back to the top of that, the deal's gone, or the loan is gone, or whatever that looks like. And what I've seen has been so powerful for our industry, and us specifically, is the ability to synthesize heavy, detailed information and create an output that is 99% accurate, right? Everything needs the human lens still. I hope
Of
that
course.
continues. But I have a deal. The AI is going to underwrite it. The AI is going to pull the demographic info, the comp info, the go down the list. And now, instead of taking 3 days to synthesize that information, I have a one pager summarized within 20 minutes. And so I am a firm believer that humans are always important and the human thought is real, and AI can't replace that. I hopefully not yet, but the ability to really create output that is meaningful in an incredibly timely manner has been big. And I hate to say this because I'm afraid of where unemployment goes, but it certainly helps your P&L when you're not creating more and more jobs that require real salaries to fulfill that need.
And I think it's a real practical perspective on how AI is impacting the business. I think that it's also going to be just generally how it impacts the industry. I'm sure that there are other peers and competitors, colleagues that you're working with that are all thinking about creative approaches to leveraging technology. But what I also find really interesting is you have created such a foundation for this type of a business that should this all go away tomorrow, you guys are still super operational. You'll find your
Exactly.
way, just right, like you're still leveraging the team, you still have the formula, that stuff still works. You're talking about an industry that's going to take a long time to kind of catch up to where the technology is today. So what I find really interesting for you is you're piloting what could be an accelerated path to performance. But should that not work, should that like be not in compliance somewhere, should you have a legal team that's just up in arms, you have the skills, you have the talent, you have the team to be able to go back and operate the old way. And I find that, especially in my business too, AI has accelerated our time to production and what we're capable of doing incredibly, but I still have masterful hand coders here that can still do what they got to do should that stuff get turned off. And I find that very much the real estate industry compares to building software as a profession very similarly from a tactical perspective. And so I'd love to know like how you're thinking about from a leadership perspective, how are you having these conversations about advancing people's careers and skill sets? How do they fit into the bigger picture? And you have some real key people on the team that like they have to be worried or anticipating or thinking about what comes next for the future of their participation. So from a leadership perspective, how are you navigating these conversations with your people?
Well, I think from a leadership perspective, culture is everything. Companies don't exist without culture, right? And bad culture is a recipe to not be successful. It starts with people, right? People create the culture. And so I will, for the rest of time, be a believer that people matter and that the human thought is important. And, more minds together is better than one. And AI can't replace emotions and feelings and gut feelings, things that humans have. I loved your comment on, very scared of creating an AI platform for ourselves that becomes obsolete in 6 months and I don't have the ability to go back. And so we aren't operating in a way of heavily replacing people. But as our businesses continue to grow, it's become clear we don't necessarily need more people. So, I look at the people that we have that work with us today. Hopefully you're here with us forever. But as we add on new things, it's becoming clear that we can replace that component with AI. Do you need a head underwriter? Maybe you don't, right? But do I need somebody to actually then go through that underwriting before it goes to investment committee and tell the story and look at the trials and tribulations of the deal and explain that? Like that doesn't get done through Claude. You know what I mean? And so I will forever be a believer that we matter, people matter, your voice, your thoughts, your emotions, as much as we don't like to be emotional in business, like all those things is what makes us special versus machines. But to think that we won't continue to really harness AI is not realistic. But I won't put ourselves in a position to run our company off of a third party AI software that can be obsolete next year. That's a
And I think
recipe
like
for disaster.
that's probably the right way to look for it. I think what's really good about the use case of these tools is you can determine, is a deal sound faster? We can move through opportunities at lightning speed just to find the best opportunities for the team without burning resources, without even burning people out. I think
Exactly.
that it's an acceleration to what is best for the business. Now, I have to ask a little bit. I know your father was a serial entrepreneur and he set the stage really nicely in the insurance industry for you. I love finding out where the original impulse of entrepreneurship actually took place. I know your story of inception and your best friend Todd, and I have some questions about partnership because I'm in partnership with my best friend as well. We'll get there, but before I get there, I want to just have a little bit of like an origin story. And the reason is because most people don't stitch together the dots of my truly entrepreneurial. And so I'd love to know, in your earliest memories of entrepreneurship, it could be your lemonade stand story, it could be shoveling snow like I did when I was 8 years old. Like where was the initial interest in entrepreneurship for you?
It's funny. I've never been asked the question of where was that first moment, but it immediately came to mind. I'm a Jewish kid from Scottsdale, right? Not many of us growing up in the 80s and 90s,
Yeah,
but
man.
Christmas was a real thing there, and Christmas tree lots was prevalent on all major corners. And I had a buddy who was like, "Hey, I've been working at this Christmas tree lot, every December, and I've been making a ton of money. Like, do you want to do it with me?" And I'm like, sure, you know what I mean? Like, I had a job starting at 13. My dad wasn't one to like, let's go travel for the summer. It was, you got to start working and figuring out your work ethic. And so I was like, must have been, I was in one and I went to go work, and I worked because I had school. So I'd go from like 4 to 9, 10 o'clock at night, Monday through Monday. And I sold the tree and I got a $20 tip because then I wrapped the tree and I tied it on the car. And I'm like, oh my God, like if I do like even 5 trees tonight and there's 100 people waiting, like I'm making real money. And I'll never forget that first 4 week Christmas season for me. I made like $3 or $4,000 as like a 14, 15 year old. And I'm like, all I did was go out and work hard. Like there was nothing special about what I did, but I worked hard. And that was the first moment where I said, I need to do something in my life that the harder I work, the more money I make. And that's it. And then I felt that moment again the first time I leased my first apartment as the owner. And I'll never forget, I had buddies that day. Brunch is a big scene in New York on the weekends. And I was 24. My buddies were like, hey, let's go to brunch on Sunday. We'll do a boozy brunch. And I'm like, I got to go do open houses at my buildings. Like, I can't. But at the end of the day, I made $30,000. I leased 6 apartments. And I remember calling my buddy being like, you know what you did today? You went to brunch. You know what I did today? I made 30 grand. And like, that was really the biggest entrepreneurial moment I've ever had in my life was, holy shit. Like you can control your life here. And so, yeah, those were kind of my two earliest and then like the last true entrepreneurial moments. Now it's all blends in. I don't even think about it as an entrepreneur. Like my just mindset is do it.
Yeah, I love it, man. So let me ask you, because I'm in partnership with my best friend since I'm 15 years old, Mike Rispoli. I'm very interested when I come across individuals that have a story where they got into business with their best friend, because it's kind of the antithesis of general basic advice that you may get from other operators that have been down that path. Don't get into business with family. Don't get into business with your best friends. You'll ultimately degrade those relationships. I have not seen that to be true in my own relationship. If anything, it has made us absolutely stronger together, and there isn't a business that I would want to run without him. And so I'm interested in your story. Was your relationship still continuing? Do you guys still feel the same way about each other that you did back in the day? Like, tell me a little bit about your story with your
Yeah,
best friend.
yeah. First of all, I'm a huge believer in partners. I think owning a business by yourself is a really, really hard thing. You live in an echo chamber of your own voice and to you have nobody to banter with and hit ideas off of, and you don't have a yin to the yang. Like, I think one way doesn't mean it's the right way. So I I have two partners. Like, I have one partner who is a best friend of mine for literally 40 years. Parents were pregnant together. We lived together in New York, like, our whole lives. And then I have Mark, our another partner, who I've now been best friends with since 2008. Um, and then in New York at our brokerage, when we started the brokerage, I had a bunch of high school friends from Arizona that just couldn't find their way. And I'm like, do you want to come work for me in New York? And so at our peak, I probably had 6, 7 lifelong best friends working for me. And I would say the biggest takeaway from having a partnership with that level of a friend, or having a friendship at that level, is trust. And at the end of the day, trust is everything. Loyalty is everything. Transparency is everything. Like, these are things that in a partnership that you found because you guys worked together for a couple of years, and you both wanted to leave that company and go start, like, that's not a tried and true relationship, right? So the ability to say, I already know I love this person. I already know exactly how this person acts. Now I'm going into business with them. You're already starting like way ahead of the game, right? You don't have to have that learning curve of, is this the right person? Do I trust him? That was weird, right? And I've been fortunate enough to be best friends with them ever since. And we've sold businesses and we've done all these things that in theory could disrupt that relationship. But at the end of the day, we love each other, we care for each other, and what's good for him is good for me. And that's an important thought way of thinking. I would suggest everybody, like, find a best friend that you can go do work with, because you've already created a level of loyalty and trust to each other that could take decades in a business environment.
Amazing wisdom, man. You know, as I have these conversations, I've had many of these conversations, I often leave the final word for you. These conversations generally stir up a whole bunch of things that you feel like you need to talk about, or questions that you may have for the world, or wisdom that you want to display, or a call to action. And so, Jordan, I give you the final word. Does anything come to mind after this conversation that you feel you don't want to leave unturned?
People have and I've said this a few times in the podcast, like, people have the ability to control their own destiny. And a lot of people get into a path that doesn't allow them to do that. And I would say that, like, life can be scary, and lack of income is scary, and the thought of failing is scary. And I'd say 95% of people are allow that fear to not allow them to move forward. And you have to just go do it. And you have to put the fear away, because you are capable. And if you believe, I know how cheesy this might sound, like, if you believe in yourself, you can be the master of your domain and find an industry that fits to your personality. Like, I was just a sales guy. Like, that's who I am. Like, whether I was selling, or I was selling real estate, like, I'm a sales guy, and I knew that. And so I had to find what I could sell that made sense. And so it doesn't have to be like, I can't go create a widget, become an entrepreneur. It's like, every pre-existing industry has the ability to be an entrepreneur in it. It's just find that space and like, take that leap, because that leap could pay off, tenfold, and create a life for yourself that you're happy to go to work. That's the key. My first job at 22, I used to walk to the office, and I'm not kidding. I looked at the guy picking up trash on the street, and I said, that looks better than what I'm about to go do. And I say to everybody who works for me, if there's a day you walk to this office and you hate being here, you got to go. And you got to go find what makes you happy. Like, because life's too short. You have kids and families and all the things. Life gets harder and harder and harder. And at the end of the day, you work 70, 80% of your week is spent working. And if you don't love what you're doing, and you're not controlling your ability to be successful for yourself, then I would tell you to go figure that out.
Well, Jordan, it's been an absolute pleasure to host you on the show. I think you fit entirely into quintessentially. And so that's how I'm going to leave you for today. Not only is it a pleasure to work together and have our business relationship that we do, but it's also a pleasure to be your friend, man. And I'm so happy to have learned from you. And I think your wisdom impacts me as an individual and as an operator. And Jordan, I wish you and everything that you touch forward to extraordinary.
You're the best. I have to, again, thank you. It's been a great relationship. We are like-minded, which only makes a partnership easier and better. Kudos to what you've done. It's also extraordinary, and everything is extraordinary in everybody's own way. And so people should remind themselves of that. But thanks for the opportunity to be here. I hope I gave a few tidbits of wisdom to somebody who needs it out there, and it was really a privilege.
Confident you did. Jordan, be well, man. Thanks so much.
You too. Thanks, Justin. Talk to you soon.